Today, I like to pay a little homage to one of my favorite mystics of all time. Many of you know about him. His name was Ramana Mahrshi. Very unique mystic and spiritual person, great renunciator. And just briefly, I'll tell you for you that who don't know, when he was 17, he somehow fell very, very ill. And he went to lie down in his room and he was overwhelmed by the feeling of dying. So, as he was going through this rather challenging experiencing, the question arose in him, who is this I? I'm saying I am dying. Who is this I that is dying? Who is dying? And so he began a natural process of analysis. And the question was, am I this body? And he had the strong feeling, perception, that there was something operating within the body, but it was not him. So then he said, am I the thoughts? Am I the things that I think? And again, he felt that there was something behind it. So then he went into the emotions. Am I the things I feel? But he felt like the others. These are things that come and go. So there is not a certain permanency, something that you can say, this is it, because none of it is permanent. And suddenly he went into a spontaneous state of communion, of what in India they call Samadhi, and the realization dawned on him that I am the Brahman, I am that which is, just pure existence, pure being, that is within our thoughts and our body, but it also transcends them. Now, that was not an intellectual experience. That was also a very, very lived, present experience. And he went into a deep trance, bliss. He was in pure bliss. When we are talking of spiritual trance, we are talking of being in such a beautiful state of happiness and peace that you don't want to be anywhere else. You don't want to go anywhere else. But anyhow, go he did, because he just wanted for a moment to get away from all his family and friends and relatives and just sit in a very quiet place. He sat for a while in a temple of a city called Tiruvannamalai, and then he decided to even go into a hill, into a cave that was away from the town, and be really silent there. So for about a year he was in constant communion. I think probably he was even having a little bit of food here and there that people would leave in front of the cave, but otherwise he was in silence. After a year, he started speaking again and people started coming to him. And I really like those stories, that I read that really illustrate how sweet he was. How this great spiritual discovery, achievement, did not make him arrogant. They didn't make him like worship of people, people condescending, people bowing to him, and all that kind of stuff. When he started talking again, there was a Brahmin, a priest, that often sat outside the cave. So that priest started telling everybody, this guy, Ramana, he is my disciple. I taught him how to reach this state of being. Of course, he was saying that so that he'll get offerings, money, and so forth. So after a while, some of the people went to Ramana and they said, Ramana, is it true that what this person says, that he is your guru? And Ramana could have said, no, well, what does he think he is? He said, well, if he thinks that he is, then he is. But of course, it took very little time for people to realize the facts. Now, the second story that I want to narrate, still when he was in that cave, because after the cave, then they built a small hut for him where people were going to visit him and so forth. But when he was still in the cave, one evening, a lady went to the cave with some food for him, for Ramana. As he was going up the hill, a tiger appeared. And of course, you can vaguely imagine, or we can vaguely imagine, because we haven't been in that situation, the fear and the terror that that woman felt. And all that she had left was that she prayed to Ramana and say, please, Ramana, save me. Now, her narration is that as she did that, Ramana appeared and the tiger left. So she rushed to Ramana, bore herself to him, and in front of other people, paid her obedience and homages to him. And he said, Ramana, you have saved my life. It is, you truly are a great saint. And she narrated the fact. And you can imagine the majority of teachers, of gurus, in a situation like this, they'll go, yes, bless you, my daughter, you're always in my heart. If you are in me, I am in you, Ramana just looked at her, and he was still a very young lad. And he said, mother. They called mother most elderly women in India, the young. So he said, your fear was so strong that you were able to materialize me. And what you saw was a projection of your own self. It was your fear, but also your faith. So it is your faith that has saved you. It's not been me. I wasn't there. And to me, I was quite touched by that, because I've always seen, living with gurus and saints for many years. Not in all of them, but in many of them, there is that kind of spiritual, a little bit of ego, bow to me, show me your devotion, and so forth. But Ramana wouldn't have any of it. Now, the third story, which is also beautiful, is in India, people tend to circumambulate, to go around a statue as a kind of homage to what that statue represents. And sometimes they circumambulate a certain amount of times, like 7 times and so forth, and they offer water, milk, and things like that. Now, many people in India, when they considered a yogi to be a really realized saint, what they do, they bring some food and water, and they do the same thing. They go around him, they circumambulate him, as if they were doing it into a statue. And again, is a thing that many saints, they don't care whether they do it or not, but many, there is again a certain pride, like, oh yes, here, And Ramana, one day, she just looked at them, and he said, it was a group of women, so he said, ladies, please, do you mind not to do that? You are making me feel dizzy. Oh, bless him, and the sweetness of his face and his talk was really something to behold. And the last story I like to tell was, he had a large room, but that room was quite large mainly for people to come and sit there and, relate to him. But for himself, he only had a very small bed in a corner, and that's where he would sleep, mainly surrounded by people. Now, his teaching, he did speak, he did say many things, but a lot of the time was through silence. People would come with a question, but just sitting in silence next to him, that question would be answered. So I just wanted to add that because it's quite a nice state of being, you know, something that represents the energy that he was emanating. So anyhow, it's around midday or 1 o'clock. Outside that room, the disciples will cook a very large meal because it would be a meal not just for him, but all the other people who were in the ashram on that day. So one day the disciples discussed that Ramana was starting to look a bit haggard, a bit tired. And they said, no wonder, because he's surrounded by people all the time. He barely has got time for himself. I mean, for a long time he was in total, asceticism, a lot isolated from everybody. But once he went through that process, it's like he gave his own self to the people. So they said he needs a bit of a break. So what we are going to do, we are going to tell the people after lunch not to go into the room with him and to allow him to be there by himself so that he can fetch a little sleep and rest. Now, so they cooked the meal, people came, they ate, they cleaned the dishes, and they went out and they saw a big crowd, a big crowd outside the room with Ramana in it. So they went to Ramana, the disciple, and they said, Maharishi, why are you standing here? You know, please go inside and have a rest. And the Maharishi said, well, we have been told that after lunch we can't enter in there. And the disciple said, but we meant that for the people who are here to give you a little bit of rest. But of course, you know, it's your room, you go in and have a rest. And Ramana said, I'm not different from anybody else who comes here. So we either all go together or we all stay outside together. So I hope you have enjoyed this brief talk. Look him up, Ramana Mahrshi. You'll enjoy reading about him. Thank you. I like to add to this story of this very, very sweet man that I regard him a lot, and it's a very important teaching of what various stages of self-realization are. Because I often spoke in my videos, particularly in the West, you know, people go through a certain opening to a certain state of awareness, of self-realization, or they use words like enlightenment, you know, and they experience a certain thing and then they label it, you know, they call it enlightenment and so forth. And my experience of decades of travel and meditation and so forth is, I agree with most of the school of Mahayana Buddhism that awakenings, there are different stages of it. Something that is not well known in the West. And what I mean to say by that is that sometimes you go through that very first moment of great self-realization where you see that I am not the thoughts and feelings that inhabit me. I am not the desires and nightmares and emotions that I always thought form the core of my being. I'm not saying now, I don't want to use words like that is all an illusion, it's not true. No, it's there. I exist. Carlito is there, is here, hello, you know. So I got my story and all that, and I'm quite happy with it. But what is really meant by that you are not defined by your past and what you have gathered. Now that very stage of awakening is, well, what can I say? It's very beautiful. You know, it's like, whoa, liberation. The nightmare is over. Now I know who I am. That is the stage most people settle in, and it's very beautiful. And but then all these are where a lot of these definitions come up, enlightenment, this and that. But for some people, at a later stage, once your inner being feels so liberated, it can stay in that joy and peace, or sometimes it takes another leap. It's like going from a cliff and you jump backwards, not caring or knowing where you are going. But all that is happening is that you are not falling anywhere. You're just awakening through the love within you. And then this freedom, this peace, transforms itself still into peace, but with amazing feeling of love. But it's not just a love towards something or an idea or anything. No, it's just the air you breathe. And that is, again, an amazing feeling. And again, then people go, wow, I'm now liberated, I'm now enlightened, I'm one with God, I am God. That is where that kind of language comes from. It's from that level. I am God, I am this, I am that, I am the Christ, blah, blah, blah. Beautiful, amazing, But still sometimes there is this, I am enlightened, I am the Christ, I am God, I'm divine. All that kind of very, very subtle sense of achievement is there. There is the love, there is the great opening, being in the present, all is there. But that still remains. And at some stage, then you see that there is still a journey to complete. And I know it might sound a bit funny, but it's a bit like a journey into nothingness. But by nothingness, I mean no thing. There is nothing. It's like the pure quantum field, just pure energy, pure being. And in there, that enlightened, very subtle sense of there being someone enlightened, that drops. And from the great glamour that you were in, you end up in a stage of great simplicity, or you start entering, let's say, into that stage, because that's a bit of a longer journey. And there is a great confession of sins that happens there. When they say the Buddha went to all his past lives and, all the hurt you have ever done comes to visit you. Not to torment you, but to dissolve. So all that is dissolved into the love. And then there is that immense tranquility. And there is not a feeling that I'm different from anybody else. There is no particular difference. So it's quite a journey. It takes quite a bit of work. I am glad I had some teachers in my journeys in the Himalayas. I was there for 7 years, that did throw the seeds of that in me, saying one day this might come handy. So I think Ramana was very much an example of that, of letting go the most difficult things in the world. And letting go, I mean, you can let go of the sense your emotions, your feelings, your past, the images of yourself. You can have that great freedom. You can then merge into the most amazing love and oneness. But it takes more work, and very few people can let go of that final ego, of the guru that can get down from the stage. and just become a child again, not different from anybody else. Take care, thanks for listening, and hope to see you soon.